Welcome to the Healing Through Connection podcast of the JCA Counseling practice, where we spread hope, encouragement, and above all, provide accurate mental health education in a misinformation TikTok world. I'm your host, Erica Gregory. I'm a marriage and family therapist and the owner of JCAC. I know the impact of poor mental health on individuals, families, and the community. So I created JCAC and this podcast because I'm really passionate about starting conversations around mental health to reduce the stigma and increase the availability of mental health resources. So thank you for being a part of the conversation and the JCA community. I want you to meet two wonderful people that I've recently met, Kimberly and Dallas Broomes. Dallas and Kimberly are working to create a nonprofit to help teens have accurate mental health information and to decrease the stigma around getting help, which are the exact goals of this podcast. So we were super excited to meet each other. We started a conversation to partner JCAC with Zen Gen, their new nonprofit. And this episode is here to unpack the goals and the plan that we're working on to bring awareness and resources to the adolescent community. So let me introduce my guests. First, Dallas Broomes. He is a 16-year-old senior at Alpharetta High School. He's the founder of Zen Gen. And let me also introduce Kimberly Broomes, his mother. She is in the marketing business and has been working to help Dallas bring Zen Gen to life. Kimberly is also the mother of 3 boys, 18s, Dallas at 16, and a 13-year-old son. So welcome, Dallas and Kimberly.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
To get the word out and, educate as many people as we can.
Let's start, Dallas. If you could take a few moments to share kind of what led you to start Zen Gen and what Zen Gen is.
All of this sort of started around the time where I made a major change in my life. I made a move actually from Georgia, the state I was born in, lived for 12 years, to the United States Virgin Islands, specifically St. Thomas. This was not only a pivotal moment just because of move, but also because I was going into high school. And anybody who's gone through a similar situation would know that going to a new high school in a new place, not knowing anybody in a place you're not familiar with, is a daunting task, and it definitely was for me. Started to suffer from mental health issues like depression, anxiety, all sorts of things. I was struggling with my ADHD, and I was trying to figure out a way to get through all of that. But unfortunately, the island did not have the proper resources, so I wasn't able to get the proper help I needed. Eventually, though, I did move back up to Georgia, and that's where I am now. And I was able to start getting the help I needed. I was able to start getting back on track to where I need to be mentally. And I realized, I have peers that are in a similar situation, that are in a similar spot, it hurts my heart every day to watch them go through this without the proper knowledge that we had to struggle to get. So I'm really hoping to get the knowledge and the awareness and just get rid of the stigma around mental wellness, because it's one of the most important things that we have as people.
Tell me more about what Zen Gen is. I obviously know, I'm excited to be a part of it, but for our listeners, tell them a little bit about what Zen Gen is and what the mission is.
At its basest idea, Zen Gen is a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit, that will provide mental health resources to teenagers who either don't know or just aren't able to get the help that they need, but it's also giving a community and a space for these things to be discussed without a stigma around them, because I do recognize the stigma currently in this generation, in Gen Z, around mental health and help.
Tell me a little more about your part of the story where peers started coming to you, and this is what kind of grew into your idea of Zen Gen.
Oh, I was relatively public, at least within my cohort. I am an IB student, International Baccalaureate, which means that my cohort is significantly smaller than most high school classes, which meant I felt an openness sort of in being able to share my experiences and how I dealt with them. I noticed a lot of my peers would sort of come to me and ask me how they should deal with certain parts of their life. But it felt wrong that so many people had so many of these issues that were going unaddressed, to the point where they reached out to me, because although I've gone through some things for sure, I am not trained, licensed like that to be able to help them in any kind of capacity like that. So it was time to build something that could help everybody, not just me and the people that I talk to, but it help as many people who need it as possible. And that's what we're setting out to do.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I know you, Kim and Dallas, you all both see the TikToks, the posts, the information out there that isn't always correct or isn't always leading people to hope, to solutions. It might be leading them down, well, this is it, and this, despair or negative or stigmatizing. What role did that play in making your decision to create this, specifically the website side of this?
Website side of this, I would say, was um, the website side of this, I would say, is a significant part just because not only does it help us get a parallel to some of these other platforms where this misinformation is spread, like TikTok, like you said, I would see all of this content talking about struggles and promoting this despair, this idea of despair, that it's not going to work out or that things are going to get worse. And I've felt that before, but I've also felt the necessity to lift oneself up. So the website was a parallel for that. And I think the role that that plays in our society, while I do think it is helpful in some regards for some people, unmoderated, unchecked, and unsupported, it can lead to disaster.
I see that too. We're actually trained as counselors, especially in support groups, to make sure the support group stays on track, make sure it stays positive, it stays on a course that leads to people walking away with gaining something from it, rather than that doom and gloom. And it's like a cycle, it's like a triggering cycle where once you see one thing, that leads to another thing, that leads to a negative thought, and then a darker thought, and a darker thought. It takes you to a place that maybe you were a little low, but now you're really low. And I've seen that a lot with teens as well. So, Kim, can you share a little bit about what you've witnessed in this story, in this evolution of witnessing Dallas's his own personal struggle, to now him on top of his health and on top of creating something that's meant to help others?
That was a great segue. The last thing you just said about how you can just go from one negative thought to another negative thought. And then you asked me this question. It's a perfect lead in, because with Dallas, when I watch him, when I hear him talking about his own struggles and then what he wants to do, having come through that and on his way to wellness, it just fills me with joy, because when I tell you, he used to spiral. He would start with the negativity, and then it would lead to the next negativity. And it might be a completely different subject that was triggering him, but it would just completely spiral until he just felt despair, right? And that is a great adjective for it. And when I see where he is today compared to where he was a year ago or 18 months ago, it's night and day. And I think the game changer here is intervention, right? If you just presume that there are 1 out of 4 teenagers I've read who have some sort of mental health challenge, when I think about all of the other teens or adolescents that are dealing with, whether it's depression, anxiety, abandonment, homelessness, grief, all of those kind of challenges, and there's no intervention, it just breaks my heart, because I see in real life, in my own son, the difference that intervention has made. And by intervention, I mean started with therapy, and the therapist then recommended, another level of care. And so we pursued that until Dallas felt better, until he was more even, until he could talk through in therapy some of the struggles that he was having, and that he could, get some medication to treat the other issues that he was dealing with, that talk therapy wouldn't handle. And so I'm incredibly proud of the work he's put in to get himself to this place, because let's be clear, it takes work. And if a child, an adult, anyone is struggling with something, whatever those struggles are will remain until they're addressed, and they will come out in some form or fashion. This is what I've learned through our experience. What I hope ZenGen to do is to collate the resources into a single place where, beginning with teenagers, they will have a single place to find the answer. Do I need help? Is what
Mhm.
I'm feeling normal, or is it something I need intervention for? Do I need
Mhm.
to talk to someone, or is this just kind of normal kid stuff? And then what is this that I'm feeling? Is it ADHD? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? There's a range of possibilities, or maybe it's I'm just sad today. But I think that the challenge that most of Generation Z has is that they know about mental health care. They've heard about it. But one thing that Dallas has said that really has struck me recently is mental health care should be as ubiquitous as physical health care.
We need a world where every single teen has access to mental health check-ins, into counseling without shame. Emotions need to be as routine as visits or academic achievement being similarly valued as emotional intelligence. This isn't just about preventing crises. It's about nurturing a generation that is equipped to handle life's challenges with resilience and wisdom. We need to
Wow.
invest in teen mental health today because we're cultivating
Mhm.
tomorrow's leaders, innovators, community builders, and every single one of those people deserve to be heard. This is, I think, a way that I could possibly imagine to share my vision.
Fantastic. That is just so impressive. I mean, wow, the wisdom coming out of you at 16, kind of seeing this problem and seeing in your peers around you, and you're heartbreaking for them, knowing what I went through and how I felt alone and how I don't want my peers to feel alone. And to get that, have that resource of what's normal, what's not. Is this depression? Is this anxiety? Do I have PTSD? Do I have ADHD? What do those acronyms even stand for?
Yeah.
Accurate information, and then resources too. And so if you do feel like maybe you need to ask or talk to somebody, here's a great list of people, providers. Here is more information about that, so that you can go ahead and start using some coping skills now, because these really tend to help for that. Those kinds of resources, so that it's, yes, I can. Here it is. This is what I need. Versus, I don't even know where to start.
Right.
I don't even know
Exactly.
who to ask. I don't even know if I can ask, because if I do, will they shame me? Will they tell me I'm lazy and I just need to, shape up and get over it, or try harder? Or will they actually hear me and care and realize that this is a little bigger than my motivation or my energy?
Right.
So I'm just so impressed by this. And Kimberly, I want to head back to you real quick, because you were sharing things about what you witnessed and the access to healthcare and how foundational it was for Dallas
Mhm.
to kind of get back on his feet, for him to work through and face what he needed to become well again. What would you say to other mothers who may be worried for their teen? Maybe I don't know if I should be getting them in help or not. I don't know if this is really something that needs intervention, or they'll just grow through this. They'll grow out of it. Because I
Yeah.
think another thing you guys are both seeing is parents who aren't as willing, wanting to kind of dismiss it, sweep it under the rug, and that impact. So if you could speak to mothers or parents in general who may be watching this thinking, well, is this my teen? I don't know.
Yeah. I know as parents, we don't always know when our kids are really feeling something or in the moment, and it will pass. And oh well, but when Dallas first started struggling, we did get him into therapy. But I think that this is an excellent example of the fact that sometimes the first therapist you try is not the right therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
just because
Mm-hmm.
your child has a therapist does not mean they're getting the help they need.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you need to evaluate the effectiveness of that particular care. And again, this is where ZenGen would come in, because we're going to have resources for teens and for the parents so that they can learn more about what their child is going through, and when there needs to be intervention, and maybe an escalated level of intervention. So I would just say, stay tuned into your child. The teen years are tough, and this Generation Z especially, they've had a lot of challenges with social media, with COVID on top of that, and like the social breakdown that they had during those COVID years. it has really done a number on a lot of kids. And so when your child is telling you, hey, I think I need to talk to someone, or hey, I think something's going on because I'm really, I'm down, and they don't have to be down all the time. Dallas wasn't sad 24 hours a day. Sometimes he went to school and had a great time, had a great day. He was totally fine. But periodically, once every couple of weeks, he would fall into these deep depressions, and he would have these crises moments. And we didn't know what to do. And so we got him into therapy. But in hindsight, that probably wasn't enough. And, without having our own personal experience with mental health care or mental health situations, we didn't know that, okay, he needs an elevated level of care. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for parents to understand. So if you have a child who has raised their hand and said, I need some help, take it seriously, because this is your child. And, it could have consequences that can be avoided and averted if you engage with your child and make sure that they get what they need. No different than if they had to go to the doctor and have vaccinations or go to the dentist for a cleaning. They need the mental health care, and they're counting on you because you are their number one advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's not going to be you, who's going to help them? Hopefully a teacher or guidance counselor or social worker at school, but ultimately the parent has the most influence and ability to help their children. And so
You
I
make
just
such a good
encourage.
point about the routineness of it.
Mhm.
When I talk to a lot of parents about should I bring my child in? Do they need to be assessed? There's almost this hesitancy. Like, I think what's also can be hard with this is depression, anxiety, all these different symptoms are of the brain. And if something's going on with our heart, if our heart's beating too fast, if our blood pressure is too high, these symptoms are very clear that there's a disorder, there's something wrong, and I need to get help for that. But when the brain is creating symptoms such as depression, anxiety, rapid thinking, difficulty sleeping, difficulty eating, whatever this is, there's an assumption of I should have control over that.
Right.
I should be able to change that. There's a lot more personality mixed in with the brain too, and self-control. Whereas we forget that the brain is an organ in the body just like any other, where if it's not working right, it's going to have symptoms, but the symptoms are going to be behavioral because that's what the brain controls is
Right.
behaviors and thoughts and feelings.
Right.
And so if it's not functioning well, those are the symptoms, but we often put them through a filter of, yeah, but. And so if I would say, I would agree with you, is if the child's asking, if the teen is asking that, let's just go ahead and just go to a counselor and determine that. But how do you find quality care? How do you find a counselor who will give you a fair assessment and will tell you if they don't need, like they just need a support group or they just need a shift in their schedule to kind of help them with coping skills or something, versus like, oh yeah, you need to come to therapy for life. That's it. We're done. How can you trust your provider? And I would say go local. Interview multiple people. When you interview them, how do you feel? What does your gut say? Trust your gut. Do they give you clear answers to your questions of what to expect in the first session? What's their process and why? It's not so much you're looking for a specific answer, but are they very clear, calm, and explain it in a way you understand it? Because that means they understand it really well. It's not they're just shooting in the dark. And what is their experience with that population? So do they see teens regularly? Do they work with depression and anxiety regularly? Do they have an assessment that they offer? So these are fair questions to ask in your consultation type style. So if it's a big box counseling center that's going to match you with an algorithm, go ahead and run away from that, because one, you don't know the quality of care, and two, you don't know who they're matching you with. And usually big box places have such high turnover, you're going to get a different counselor every few sessions. And so if you're going local, if you're speaking to the person who's going to be your child's counselor, you've got to trust this person with the mental health of your child, with the development and the growth, the maturity of your child. That's a big deal. So you need to feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so usually also with us, at least, we do the intake with child or with teen and parent together, at least for the first half of the session, so that you also get a flavor and feel for how we're asking questions and how we're handling the room and how your child feels in our presence. And does this feel comfortable for them? And then it's that kind of litmus test afterwards of how did you feel about that session? Does this feel like the right fit? Because personality fit is equally as important as training. If you don't feel comfortable, if you can't open up, it's not going anywhere. You've got to trust. You're going to be extremely vulnerable and open. You got to trust I can do that and I'll be heard and I'll be cared about. We want you to get that help. We want you to have that great fit. And if it's not us, we want to help you find who is. At least at JCAC, that is our kind of our foundation and our mission. I think a big goal of Zen Gen is to have a provider list of counselors who've been vetted, who we know will offer all of these qualities for you so that you don't have to worry about going through that vetting process yourself or trying to jump through a lot of hoops, because I know that can be really hard.
When I was first starting out with this whole process of getting well, I was completely unaware of, did I need help? What is getting help versus helping myself? How do I catch this early? Because I don't want it to progress beyond a certain point. And because I didn't know some of these things, it did progress, farther than I would have wanted. So I think that's a big questions that I go through, because a lot of people might just don't know how to do this, don't know how to do that, really process that.
Absolutely. And that's such a good question of, do I need help? What do I have? Is this real? Is this in my head? Well, the reality is mental health is in our head. That's where it comes from. It's our brain. And sometimes our brain isn't functioning at its full capacity, just like any other organ of the body, like we were talking about earlier. I also want to note that there's a lot of pressure people put on themselves of, I should know what's wrong with me. But if you, let's say, woke up, didn't feel well, sore throat, achy body, you may assume maybe I have a sore throat, but then you go to the doctor and get tested and it's not sore throat. You've got the flu. You go to the doctor and you get tested for things and it's something different. It's not what you expected. And that can be true for mental health too. So if you are struggling, I think the key is, do you feel in control? Can you turn the day and kind of go like, you know what, I was a little low, but let me do a few things, take care of myself, and now I feel a little better. Focus on your tests, focus on concentration. When you have certain goals, certain values, I want to make these grades or I want to take these classes, and you're not able to follow through with that. Like who I want to be and what I value to do, I'm not able to follow through with that. That's not what I want. Mental health is the brain operating in a way where we're not choosing that. I'm not choosing depression. I'm not choosing anxiety. So when you feel that lack of control, that means there's something else going on physically in the body that's going on, just like you were if you were to be sick. And you may need more help. And that help can be counseling. Counselors are the ones who sit with you, talk with you for an hour, once a week, ongoing care. Psychologists are the ones who do testing, are the ones who are going to do a battery of tests and give you diagnoses or be able to write out a report that you may need for school, for work, or for disability. And then psychiatrists are the ones who are medical doctors who can prescribe medication. Most people don't know the difference between the three. That's why I went into detail about that. But you may just need a counselor just to create some coping skills, new thought patterns, new mindset, have an understanding. This is true very much for anxiety. Anxiety is a disorder of the brain that is the most foundation to how we function. Cortisol is the stress hormone. We need cortisol to function. The proper level of cortisol makes us feel productive, gives us the energy throughout the day, and it's in a cycle with melatonin, where melatonin is increased in production more at night to help us wind down, go to sleep, not have the racing thoughts at night. And then cortisol is produced in the morning to wake us up, make us feel productive, make us feel like we can get up, right? And so there's a cycle of melatonin and cortisol, and sometimes that cycle can be thrown off. And so that's why some people stay up at night, feel more groggy in the morning. I digress though. Anxiety, we need it. Anxiety is what makes us jump when there's a danger nearby. If someone were to slam on our brakes in front of us, do we react in a timely manner to protect ourselves from hitting that car? That is our anxiety pathways in our systems of perceiving and watching for danger in our environment and responding accordingly. But the diagnosis of anxiety is when it goes too far, when it goes too high. I'm anxious all the time. I'm hyper vigilant, looking for danger in an uncharacteristic way of my environment. So if I am sitting in a classroom trying to learn this math thing from the teacher, my brain is constantly scanning the environment rather than focusing on the material in front of me. And that can often look like ADHD. I'm a little hypervigilant. I have a hard time sitting still. I'm more impulsive. I have a hard time focusing. Those are all anxiety symptoms. So a lot of teens may be like, oh, I have ADHD. Let me take a stimulant. That's adding fuel to the fire of anxiety, making anxiety worse. So that's another thing of why you need to see someone. That's why you need to have an assessment to determine, is this anxiety or is this ADHD? Because the treatment is very different. And then depression, I think, is the most diagnosed and underappreciated diagnosis out there. And what I mean by that is if someone's having a bad day or sad, they'll use the word depression. I have depression today or whatnot. So it's kind of a key word that isn't seen as serious as it really is. And it doesn't have very much respect behind it. So if someone truly has clinical major depression disorder, oh, you're just having a bad day. Oh, you'll bounce out of it. And so it's this mindset around it that makes us downplay the seriousness of depression, where depression is where the brain isn't producing the hormones the body needs. Dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are the big three of depression. And when those aren't produced, like if your favorite thing in the world is fishing, with depression, the idea of I've got to get my tackle box out. I've got to drive there. I've got to be on the lake and it's going to be hot. Everything about it feels hard, heavy, work. Before it was like, I cannot wait to get out on the lake. That's one of the big warning signs that I look for to determine, is this just angst or is this truly depression? And then who you are is different. So mental health, depression is a liar. It lies to you about who you really are. I can't make friends. No one will care about me. It doesn't matter how I feel. All of these really heavy thoughts come with depression because dopamine, our joyful hormone, isn't being produced in the quantities that we need. And so everything feels harder, heavier, and impossible. And so our thought process follows in turn. And so let's say you have depression and you get diagnosed with that, you get on medication. Well, that's not the only intervention that you need with something like depression, because now you've gotten the habit of that negative mindset. So even though your hormones and your body may be responding really well to the medication, it's just going to bring you down every day. And so let's get the brain working and let's get the mindset right too. And so usually these two things in tandem really work well together. And it doesn't mean you have to be on medication forever. It doesn't mean you have to be in therapy forever. It is something that we kind of ebb and flow. We check in. Kim, you mentioned in his story that there were days where he was all right and days where he was down. And some people might be like, well, that doesn't sound like depression. It actually is. So major depressive disorder has episodes. You'll have time periods where you'll be kind of to your normal self, and then you'll have really low periods where everything feels harder. I can't focus and concentrate on my schoolwork. It's almost like your brain isn't on, and that really defeats your self-esteem, especially when you're a high achiever, when you put a lot of pressure on yourself. If you have any perfectionism, now you're beating yourself up for not getting out of bed. And so it's like this compounding effect. And then if anyone in your support network were to give you just snap out of it. Oh, you're just having a bad day, to really undermine and unvalidate what you really are going through. In reality, unless you've had depression, it's hard to understand. Because it's one of those things you almost have to experience to get it, to get the weight, to get I can't break through this with willpower. Telling your brain, produce dopamine. Come on, just produce it. You can't will yourself out of it. And so often people fall into that stigma. And that's one thing we really want to challenge. And so how do you know the difference between, is this average teenage angst or is this a medical illness? Is control. Can I bounce back from a bad day? Is the stress associated with that big test? And then after the big test, I feel better and then I'm able to get back to my normal routine? Or does the anxiety just morph into something else? I was anxious about the test. I took it the night after. It's almost like my brain's searching for something new to be anxious about, grabs onto something and ruminates on that. That would mean anxiety. That means your cortisol level goes high, stays high, doesn't come back down, which then impacts sleep, ruminating thoughts, can't feel comfortable in your skin, difficulty focusing, concentrating. So that would be that stress versus anxiety test. Depression versus bad day is bad day has a trigger. A friend was mean to me, I got bad news and I'm reacting to that, grieving or upset or emotional, versus depression is I just woke up and I have no idea why I can't get out of bed right now. It's that kind of what is happening. Fear response would mean the difference between. But then also I want to give credence to going through adolescence is really hard. And the brain is growing at a very rapid rate. Usually what I see is a growth of the limbic system. So the emotions are much bigger than our regulatory system, but usually it catches up after 6 months. But in that in between, it's really uncomfortable. That's why we see kids acting out more or shutting down more when it's like, wait, this isn't my kid. They don't normally act like this. But then 6 months later, it's like, there they are. Then also adolescence has very much unique stressors than any other time of life. You are doing all of your firsts in adolescence, going to high school, a lot more independent, driving for the first time, asking girls or guys on dates. You're putting yourself out there for a lot more rejection, interviewing for your first job, figuring out who you are, where you're going in life. Those are big choices. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of stress. Mm-hmm. And so feeling that weight is very normal for that age. And so is this stress or is this anxiety? We don't want the stress to turn into anxiety, but being fair to yourself of course I'm carrying a lot. This is a tough season of life. And I've got a lot of big questions or big tests coming up or a lot of pressure on me. So a good check-in point with this is perfectionism. I see a lot of teens now struggling with that more than I ever have. Of if I don't make a 90 or plus, I'm not good enough. Or if I don't know exactly what I want to do, not good enough. This is the age to try and then fail and learn from the failure and then try again and try this job and go, no, that's not my job. Anything in that arena is canceled out. Let's try other types of jobs. Like I tried a bunch of desk type jobs where you sit down at a desk and work at a computer and engineering firms and stuff from my family's businesses. Not for me. And I remember after a summer of doing that going, I never want to work in a cubicle in my life. I never want to sit at a desk in my life. I never want a normal schedule in my life. And 9 to 5, never for me. And that was really good information at 18. And so then when I started waiting tables, it's like, I like being on my feet. I can handle that. And so what does that look like for a real career? So failure is information, and viewing it that way can be really helpful to kind of skirt that perfectionism mindset. And then the other big one that I would want to speak to is trauma. Trauma is very misunderstood, especially with big T and little t trauma. Big T is the big ones like rape, being a part of a crime, being in the military, and being in a war zone where you've experienced really heavy things. And so people with little t trauma, which is like a really bad breakup, a tragic grieving loss of an unexpected family member, any kind of pain where I didn't have control to stop it. So what I hear a lot of people with little t is, yeah, but I never went through blank, so I can't say I have trauma, and downplay the symptoms. All trauma needs is pain that I can't stop and I feel out of control over, and that creates a process in the brain where I'm hypervigilant to anything associated with that. Let's say you had a bad breakup and you were in that hallway at school when it happened and you felt really embarrassed. It was public. You were really heartbroken. And now every time you walk through that hallway at school, it's like your heart sinks. The rest of your day is just kind of off because your body is reacting to that kind of thing is going to happen to me again, even though logically we know it isn't. And it creates an emotional reaction that isn't something we have control over. So that's the difference between I just had a bad thing happen to me and that stunk versus I have a trauma reaction is every time I'm reminded of it, it's like my whole day is emotionally compromised with a very strong response system. Going back to the example of someone's driving in front of you and slams on their brakes, that panic feeling you have after you slammed on yours, you didn't hit them, you're okay, but it's just that, if someone had trauma, that panic wouldn't stop all day versus someone without trauma. I might be edgy for 30 minutes. I might just be a little more uncomfortable, but then after that, I kind of feel my body going back to normal. That's a normal response to a high stressor.
Example, one of our branches, the Zen Gen Club, will have a similar structure where we gather questions from our community and invite people to ask and to be curious and to learn of themselves and others and to learn about themselves, because said this needs to be commonplace. This can be primary every single person like me. This is a developmental stage going to grow into, and it's one way that we're
and I like that with ZenGen. It's a combination of one, the website, and where there's going to be videos like this, going into depth about all sorts of topics. But also on that website is going to be a plethora of really great providers so that you know where to look for the right provider near you. Feeling felt, feeling understood, that connection. It's like the thing is still there. Maybe I still have lost my dad, or I still are going through depression, but I know I'm not carrying this by myself. That's very regulating. It really helps that kind of, I can do this, or I'm not alone in this. It's very powerful. Dallas, do you have any examples of that, of people who are there for you, who really made the difference of maybe I can't ask for help or I deserve help?
Mates are a big place to go there, but I mean, my experience, they can be friendly and understanding of your situation, and sometimes they could be on the opposite end of that spectrum. So, I did have a good experience. I've been up here for at high school. Those kinds of people, teachers, also, they care a lot more than you would think. Is want you to be okay. They want to see you in class every day. They want to see you fine. So they care a lot about you. Very good mix of support. And I would say those examples of people that can just help try to lift you throughout the day so you feel as though you're not walking through this dark path alone, and you have somebody that can help guide you and that can help keep you company, I guess, doing it.
And I think that that is why Club ZenGen, we feel so strongly about getting it up and running, because what it will do is it will create a community within the school so that you know that there are others in the school who can support each other. So for those kids who are going through their day feeling down about one thing or another, they also know there's a lot of other kids that are experiencing something similar. Sometimes it's just good to know you're not alone. You're not the only one who's feeling down or low. And especially if you have to spend 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day at school, it's good to know that there's someone there who's holding your hand, or who's looking out for you, or who is patting you on the shoulder saying, how you doing today? Sometimes that might be all it takes. Dallas was a brand new student and he didn't have any friends. It was tough, and he happened to be going through it at that time. And so that was difficult, just having that awareness or having that camaraderie amongst your peers. Club ZenGen can help bring those kids together. When Dallas was in the 11th grade, he was a new student. He was going through a lot of anxiety and depression. And once a week, I was getting a call from school. I needed to come pick him up. There were some times he was really low and I was very worried about him. What would be your recommendation, Erica, on how to handle a situation like that, where as a mom, if my son is calling me and saying, I can't stay here, you got to come get me right now, to me, that's a crisis, because that means I have to leave work, go get my son because he's saying he can't. How would you advise parents in that situation? Or if your child is saying, I don't want to be here anymore, literally on this planet, how would
Yes.
you recommend that parents handle those?
So I'm going to take two lanes with that. One is if they're suicidal thinking, I don't want to be here anymore, thoughts of death or dying. And one, if it's that lack of functioning, I can't do this, I can't function anymore. Because I would say there's like two different places a child can be, and they can also overlap. So there's also that. But I'll start with suicidality because I feel like that is the most acute, the most serious. We've seen teens who are suicidal, who have followed through with things recently, in at least in our local communities, and it's been tragic. Suicidal thinking is anything on the scale of, if I weren't here anymore, who would care, all the way to I want to die tomorrow and this is how. And it comes from a place of despair. It comes from a place of, I've been living in intense emotional pain and I need to get out. My escape idea of stopping this pain is to simply not be alive, because then that is my solution to not feeling this anymore. The pain centers of the body, the same ones that were if you were hit with a hammer, that part of the brain that would process that pain is the same part of the brain that processes emotional pain. And so that's why people may cut or self-harm, because the emotional pain is so enormous. Your body puts all its resources to that because that's more of like, uh-oh, something's happening. And so that part of the brain processes only the physical pain and gives you a break from the emotional pain. So that's why it's almost cathartic for people to self-harm, and why they say that is. And so that tells me wow, you're living with a lot of emotional pain. And that also is not something to be minimized or just stop it. For someone to get to a suicidal place, you have to have an immense amount of emotional pain and hopelessness and feeling alone and like there isn't a real solution to make this go away. And so if someone's in that low despair place, they may not say anything about death or dying, but they may say, what's the point? Who cares? I don't want to anymore. It may sound like that, and that's the cue for you to start asking, but it's important to ask. They may feel nervous to bring it up. They may not know how to bring it up. A lot of times, especially with depression, they don't know how to talk about what they're feeling because the part of the brain that connects to what I'm feeling to the verbal, communicative part of our brain is actually what's shut down when you're depressed. So them saying, I don't know how I feel or I don't know why, that's not a lie. That's true. And that's just another part of the symptoms of how heavy of what they're going through. I like to ask, have you been thinking about not being here anymore? Have you been thinking about dying? Or has any thoughts been making you feel like taking your own life? I don't like to use the word suicide because suicide can be a very triggering word. And I think suicide is also a very misunderstood word. Thoughts about suicide means thoughts about death. It doesn't always mean I'm going to die tomorrow and this is how. And so that misunderstanding may someone say, well, no, I don't. But then you may not get what they really are thinking or where they really are with it. And so asking more vague, open-ended questions helps you get more of where they are, what they're saying, what they're thinking inside their mind. And then the most important thing, if someone is that low, is they don't need to be alone. There's a great book, Why People Die by Suicide. It's a heavy book, but it's very informative. In that book, there's a lot of examples of those who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. About 30% live. And so they're able to interview those. And they have about 5 seconds of falling before they hit the water. And so they have a little bit of time to think about what they just did. 95% said I regretted immediately and prayed I would live. One person said, as I walked up the bridge, if one person smiles at me, I won't do it. The power of connection and the fact that this isn't really what they want. It's just, I need to escape this pain. Being nurturing, being present is huge to help somebody who is in that spot. So now I'll speak to with the first part of your question, which is, I can't function. I can't be here. I would first say, respect that. Unless there's deception and deviousness and a personality disorder thing going on where they may be trying to play a game with you to get out of school. If they're truly like, you can see in their eyes, I am not okay. You can hear in their tone of their voice, something is wrong. I would say, okay, I'm coming to get you. Because being at school and pushing through isn't going to help anything. Be like, okay, you have the flu, stay at school and push through. It's going to go well. You don't rest, you don't get better. And so being able to slow down and kind of think through what is going on, hold space and room for being able to go to see a counselor so that you have someone to talk to. We can really figure out what's going on. A lot of parents and teens put a lot of pressure on school. Of like, well, if I can't miss anything and mental health is not an excuse to miss school. Yes, it is. What's more important? That they slow down, figure out what's wrong, comes up with solutions, have coping skills, and come back to school strong? Or we take a day off, we immediately jump back in, pretend everything's okay. I have a therapist appointment next week, but I've done so much in between. It's hard to remember what was going on that day, or I've learned how to shut it down, numb myself, almost what we call it dissociation. I'm just going to function without feeling mode. So now I don't even know how to describe what's wrong anymore. And so taking that pause and saying, we're going to make you well first, and then we're going to send you back to school is really, really important, because then they're going to come back and thrive and do really well and learn from this and grow as a person versus this really isn't that important. Shut it down, turn it off, pretend it's not happening. I'm fine, which is what we're teaching our kids to do by just throwing them right back in it. If functioning isn't possible anymore, take that seriously and do what you need to do to get them the help and then return them back when they're ready. I think that's another way we decrease stigma is we stop pretending like I'm fine when we're not.
Thank you for that. That was great. And I mean, I think, mental health days for kids are necessary. We all need them from time to time. And so if an adult needs a mental health day, imagine a kid. So I agree with you fully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we as adults get depression and shut down, we call out of work. We don't have to ask anyone's permission. Teens do. Yep. And if they're pushed to go through, that's why most teens present as more irritable and angry than sad and depressed. When they have depression, it's because they're having to put on game face when they're tired and they're overwhelmed. It's a lot. And so not being taken seriously exasperates and makes the symptoms worse. So kind of in speaking about that, Dallas, what is the game plan of ZenGen to make a difference, to make an impact for students who may be coming to school feeling like this, maybe don't know, hey, is it time to take this seriously or not? How is ZenGen going to serve the teens, your peers?
ZenGen is currently set up as of, I guess, yesterday. We had to discuss things and several meetings in the past with the superintendent of schools of Fulton County, along with the principal at my own school. And we are going to start our Zen Gen Club, the first one being at Alpharetta High School. We're going to try to get as many people involved as possible. We're going to spread the word. This is as important as you say it is. We have a website in development that is going to list all of our resources, all of our team, everything in that regard. Beyond that, it's just create a sense of community at every place we're able to touch.
I love that. Sense of community, everywhere we can touch, anywhere we can have an impact. I can see this being nationwide in a few years. I really can.
Well, Dallas, the plan is, Dallas will be going away to college next year. And so ZenGen for high school will stay right here, but there's no reason that he can't bring ZenGen to his college campus and start a community there as well. So super excited to expand because let's be clear, it's really needed throughout development from elementary school, age appropriate, all the way up to adulthood. And so if Dallas is championing this project, there's no reason why he can't take it through every step of his own journey. So,
and I wonder if someone wanted to get involved and wanted to start it at their school, could they be the champion? Like, do we need that right now? Almost like champions for new schools, even middle schoolers, even different high schoolers in Fulton, Forsyth, or Gwinnett County, which is kind of where we're all located here in north of Atlanta. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you, Dallas? What are the next steps for something like that?
Want to get in contact with us, you can send us an email at zengenlife.us, ENGENLIFEUS@gmail.com. If you're interested in starting anything like a club or volunteering or helping out, or outreach is another big one, because we're trying to affect as many people as possible. All of the great avenues to contact us. Beyond that, you just have questions, you can send us an email and we will get back to you and we will try to help you as best as possible.
Awesome.
and
Awesome.
don't
And
forget,
JCAC, we offer the counselor through an intern to come and help facilitate that group so it stays positive. We have a mental health professional right there that is able to answer questions or elaborate more or do a little education piece about this or that, whatever the topic of the day is. How do people donate? How do people get involved in that way?
So we have a QR code that's right here on the screen. You'll be able to go to a webpage where you can contribute financially. But we're also looking for donations in other ways. For example, the Zen Gen Club, this is an after school club. So anyone who's interested in donating pizzas or drinks or anything we can do to get them to the place where we can start educating them and get them also on the journey to wellness. We're happy to take any other donations as well, even non-financial if they're food donations.
Maybe help with starting the website or help with kind of getting traction marketing. If you have skills in those sets, that any help is appreciated. Alrighty, so the QR code is up. The email address that Dallas gave is also up. Feel free to use that. In the description is also a link to donate and also Dallas's email address there if you want to copy and paste from that. So if you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. Also, if you would like to leave a comment of what are your questions? What do you want to see ZenGen doing or talking about at first? What do you want the first few clubs to be about? If you're a student at Alpharetta High School and you're watching this because you're interested in ZenGen, what club topics do you want? So please leave that in the comments, and that way we know we can organize all that information, and we look forward to putting things together for you. I also want to thank you, Dallas, for letting me be a part of this. I'm super honored to be a part of this. I've always had the dream of having this podcast more community minded and more community connected. And I'm just so thrilled that it's like our mission gets to be served too. and look forward to seeing where it goes and the lives we get to impact.
We are honored to have you on board, and we thank you for everything you've done and continue to do as a part of this project. We really do.
I second that emotion. Thank you, Erica. It's been a blessing to have connected with you and to have learned so much from you. The difference that your involvement has made, I can't even tell you. It's incalculable. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. If you want to be involved, links are below. Thank you guys for being a part of the conversation and the podcast.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right.